I used to believe that family meant everything, that the people who shared your blood would always have your back, no matter what. My wife, Natalie, taught me that real family is something you build, not something you are born into. She had the kindest heart of anyone I have ever known. Her sister, Brooke, was the opposite. And what Brooke did to us changed everything we thought we knew about trust, love, and betrayal. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, so you can understand just how deep this betrayal cut. I met Natalie at a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She was grading papers at a corner table, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, completely absorbed in her work. I was a software engineer who had ducked in to escape the downpour, and something about the way she smiled at the barista made me want to know her story. We talked for 3 hours that first day. She told me about her job teaching 3rd grade, how she loved watching kids discover their love for reading, how she believed every child deserved someone who believed in them. Her warmth was magnetic. By the time the rain stopped, I knew I wanted to see her again. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. Those years were filled with weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes, and late-night conversations about our dreams. Natalie wanted to open a tutoring center for underprivileged kids someday. I wanted to build a life with her wherever that took us. Our wedding was small and intimate, held in the backyard of her parents' house on a crisp October afternoon. The leaves were turning gold and red, and Natalie wore her grandmother's pearl earrings. Her father, Richard, walked her down the makeshift aisle between rows of white chairs. Her mother, Diane, cried happy tears in the front row, and her younger sister, Brooke, stood as maid of honor, smiling in her lavender dress. At the time, I thought I was gaining a second family. Richard was a retired accountant who loved talking about fishing. Diane made the best apple pie I had ever tasted. They welcomed me with open arms, or so I believed. After the wedding, Natalie and I bought a small 2-bedroom house about 20 minutes from her parents' place. It had a little front porch where we would sit on summer evenings drinking iced tea and watching the neighbors walk their dogs. Life felt simple and good. I counted myself as one of the luckiest men alive. Natalie's sister Brooke was 4 years younger, working as a sales associate at a clothing boutique downtown. She had a way of commanding attention when she walked into a room. Her laugh was loud, her outfits were bold, and she always had a story about some drama in her life. At family dinners, conversations often revolved around Brooke's latest crisis, whether it was a difficult customer, a fight with a friend, or another failed relationship. Brooke cycled through boyfriends like seasons. Each one started as the love of her life and ended as the villain of her story. It was never her fault. The men were always too controlling, too distant, too boring, or too something. Richard and Diane nodded sympathetically at every tale, reassuring her that she deserved better, that the right man would come along. Natalie once confided in me during a quiet moment after a family gathering. She told me that growing up, she always had to be the responsible one. When Brooke got in trouble at school, Natalie covered for her. When Brooke maxed out credit cards in college, their parents paid them off while Natalie worked 2 jobs to pay her own tuition. It was an unspoken rule in the family. Brooke needed protecting, and Natalie needed to understand. I listened and held her hand, not fully grasping then how deep those patterns ran. 2 years into our marriage, Brooke's latest relationship imploded. She showed up at our door one evening with 2 suitcases and mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her boyfriend had cheated, she said. She had nowhere to go. Could she stay with us for just a couple of weeks until she found an apartment? Natalie did not hesitate. Of course, she said, pulling her sister into a hug. We have the guest room, Stay as long as you need. I agreed, because that is what you do for family. Or at least that is what I thought. The first week was fine. Brooke kept to herself, mostly spending time on her phone or watching television in the guest room. She thanked us for dinner every night and offered to help with dishes. It felt like we were doing a good thing helping someone we loved through a hard time. By the third week, things started to shift. Brooke began finding reasons to be wherever I was. If I was in the kitchen making morning coffee, she would appear moments later needing a glass of water. If I was working on my laptop in the living room, she would settle onto the couch nearby, commenting on whatever show was on, asking my opinion about things. She started asking me for rides to work even though her car was perfectly functional. She said she hated driving in traffic. It made her anxious. I did it a few times because saying no felt awkward. One evening, I came home from work to find Brooke had made dinner. Not for all three of us, but specifically something she said she knew I loved. Natalie was running late at school for parent-teacher conferences. Brooke had set the table for 2 candles lit, a bottle of wine open. I thanked her, but said I would wait for Natalie to eat. Something flickered across Brooke's face, a look I could not quite read. She shrugged and said, "Suit yourself," then took her plate to the guest room. The weeks stretched into 3 months. I started finding reasons to work late. I took up jogging in the evenings just to have time outside the house. Something felt wrong, but I could not articulate it without sounding paranoid or conceited. Was I imagining that my sister-in-law was acting strangely around me? It seemed too ridiculous to say out loud. Then came the night that made it impossible to ignore. I woke up at 2 a.m, throat dry, needing water. I walked to the kitchen and found Brooke sitting at the table in the dark. She was wearing a thin nightgown, the kind you would not wear around your sister's husband. When I flicked on the light, she looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as expectant. She said she could not sleep. She said she had been thinking a lot lately about her life, about what she really wanted. She asked if I ever felt like I had settled for something safe instead of going after what truly excited me. I told her I needed to get back to bed. I filled a glass of water and left without looking back. My heart was pounding, not from attraction, but from the realization that something very wrong was happening in my home. The next morning, I told Natalie we needed to talk about a timeline for Brooke moving out. I framed it carefully, saying the arrangement had gone on longer than expected, and we needed our space back as a couple. Natalie agreed it was time and said she would talk to Brooke that weekend. Brooke moved into an apartment across town the following week. I felt relief wash over me. The tension that had been building in my chest began to ease. Maybe I had imagined the worst of it. Maybe she was just lonely and awkward. But Brooke did not stay away. She came over every Sunday for family dinner, even after moving out. She texted Natalie constantly, always needing advice about something. And whenever she visited, she found ways to be near me. A hand on my shoulder that lingered too long. Sitting next to me on the couch, even when other seats were available. Comments about how lucky Natalie was, how she wished she could find someone like me. I started making excuses to be elsewhere when Brooke came over. Golf with a coworker, a project deadline, anything to avoid the discomfort of her presence. The turning point came at Richard's 65th birthday party. The whole family gathered at her parents' house, about 20 people, including aunts and uncles and cousins. I was helping set up tables in the backyard when Brooke appeared beside me. She said I had been avoiding her. I said I had just been busy. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, and said she knew there was something between us. She said she felt it, and she was sure I felt it too. I stepped back and looked her directly in the eyes. I told her she was wrong. I told her I loved Natalie, only Natalie, and there was nothing between Brooke and me except family obligation. I told her this needed to stop. Brooke tilted her head and smiled a smile that did not reach her eyes. She said we would see about that. Then she turned and walked back into the house like nothing had happened. That night after the party, I told Natalie everything. I sat her down in our living room and recounted every uncomfortable moment, every strange interaction, including what had just happened. I watched her face shift through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, hurt. She said maybe I was misreading things. Brooke was affectionate by nature. Brooke had always been a flirt. It did not mean anything serious. I insisted that this was different, that her sister was actively pursuing me, and we needed to set firm boundaries. Natalie decided to call her mother to talk it through. I could hear Diane's voice through the phone, sharp and defensive. Brooke would never do something like that. Marcus must have misunderstood. Maybe he was the one giving off signals. Then Richard called back on the house phone. His voice was cold. He told me I should be ashamed of myself making such accusations against Brooke. He said Natalie deserved better than a husband who fantasized about his sister-in-law. I tried to defend myself, but they would not listen. In their minds, the narrative was already set. Brooke was the victim. I was the problem. And Natalie was caught in the middle, wanting to believe her husband, but struggling against a lifetime of family loyalty. We went to bed that night in silence. Natalie did not reach for my hand like she usually did. I lay awake for hours feeling the distance between us like a physical weight. 6 months passed. The accusations were never discussed again, treated like an embarrassing incident everyone wanted to forget. Brooke continued coming to family events. I continued avoiding her as much as possible. Natalie and I found our rhythm again, though something had changed, a thin crack in the foundation of our trust. Then came the day that shattered everything. I was on a business trip to San Francisco, scheduled to return Friday evening. But my meetings ended early Thursday, so I caught an earlier flight. I wanted to surprise Natalie, maybe take her out to dinner at that Italian place she loved. I decided to swing by her school first, thinking I would catch her finishing up for the day. But when I arrived, the receptionist told me Natalie had left early, saying she was not feeling well. I drove home, a small knot of worry in my stomach. When I turned onto our street, I saw Brooke's silver sedan parked in our driveway. That knot tightened into something harder. I walked through the front door quietly. The house was still, but I could hear voices from the living room. I moved closer, stopping just outside the doorway, hidden from view. Brooke was crying, her voice shaky but somehow also triumphant. She said she was pregnant, and then she said the words that felt like a knife through my chest. She said Marcus was the father. Time stopped. I could not move, could not breathe. I heard Natalie's sharp intake of breath, heard the devastation in her voice as she asked Brooke what she was talking about. Brooke kept talking, spinning a story about a night when she had been staying with us, how I had come to her room, how one thing led to another. She said she had been too ashamed to say anything before, but now she had to because of the baby. I stepped into the doorway. Natalie turned to look at me, her face pale, her eyes filled with a pain I will never forget. Brooke looked at me too, and for just a moment I saw it. A flicker of satisfaction quickly masked by more tears. She had been waiting for this. She had planned this moment. I told them it was a lie, every word of it. I had never touched Brooke, never been alone with her in any situation that could be twisted this way. I demanded to know what she was really doing, what game she was playing. Brooke doubled down on her performance. She sobbed harder, saying she knew I would deny it, saying she had proof. But when pressed, the proof was vague, just her word against mine. I said we would do a DNA test the moment that baby was born. I said we would prove right then and there that I was not the father. Brooke agreed without hesitation, which made my stomach drop. Why was she so confident? Within hours, Richard and Diane arrived at our house. Diane swept Brooke into her arms, cooing comfort, while shooting looks of disgust at me. Richard positioned himself between me and the women like I was a threat. He called me every name I had ever heard, and some I had not. He said I had violated their family's trust. He demanded that Natalie divorce me immediately. He said no daughter of his should stay married to a man who would do something so despicable. I tried to speak, tried to explain, but my words were drowned out by accusations. Natalie sat frozen on the couch, staring at nothing while her family dismantled our marriage around her. That night, after her parents finally left with Brooke in tow, Natalie moved her things to the guest room. She said she needed space to think. She said she did not know what to believe anymore. The following weeks were the loneliest of my life. We lived in the same house like strangers passing each other in hallways without speaking. I threw myself into work staying at the office until the building security asked me to leave. Anything to avoid the emptiness of a home that no longer felt like mine. Natalie, meanwhile, was going through something I did not see. She was quiet, withdrawn, but not idle. She was watching, thinking, investigating. 2 weeks after Brooke's announcement, Natalie asked to use my laptop because hers was updating. I handed it over without thought. An hour later, she called me into the living room, her voice strange, tight. She had gone onto the shared family cloud account, the one we all used for storing photos from holidays and gatherings. And in Brooke's backup files, she had found a folder of old messages synced from years back. The messages were between Brooke and a college friend, and they laid everything bare. Brooke had written about her plan to take over Natalie's perfect life. She complained about how unfair it was that Natalie got everything: the good husband, the nice house, the stable career. She said she deserved it more. She said she was going to make it happen. In later messages after she had moved out of our house, she wrote about being pregnant by her ex-boyfriend, the one who had supposedly cheated on her. She said she was going to tell everyone the baby was mine. She said it would destroy Natalie's marriage, and maybe when the dust settled I would realize Brooke was the better choice all along. Natalie sat beside me, showing me message after message. The evidence was undeniable. Her sister had orchestrated everything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Natalie started to cry. Not the quiet tears I had seen before, but deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I held her while her body shook, while years of being the dutiful daughter, the understanding sister, finally broke apart. When she could speak again, she said she wanted to confront them, all of them. She wanted her parents to see what Brooke had done. Natalie called a family meeting at her parents' house for that Saturday. She said it was important that there were things that needed to be discussed. Richard and Diane agreed, probably expecting it would be Natalie announcing our divorce. We arrived together, which I could see surprised them. Brooke was there, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, playing the victim role to perfection. Natalie stood in the center of her parents' living room, the same room where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where she had grown up believing these people would always support her. She spoke calmly and clearly. She presented the evidence. Screenshots printed on paper, timestamps, visible conversations laid out in damning detail. She explained how Brooke had planned this. She showed the messages about the real father of the baby. She let the truth fill the room like smoke. Brooke's face went white. She tried to speak, to deny, but her words came out in stammers. She looked to her parents for rescue, and rescue came. Diane said the messages must have been faked. Richard said Brooke probably wrote those things as a joke, that she did not mean them. They said sisters sometimes fought, sometimes wrote mean things, but that did not mean Brooke would actually do something so terrible. Natalie asked them to listen, really listen to what they were saying. She asked if they understood that Brooke had just confessed in her own words to a deliberate plan to destroy her sister's life. She asked if they were really going to keep protecting Brooke even now. Richard said Natalie was being dramatic. Diane said maybe Natalie had pushed Brooke to this somehow, that there were always two sides to every story. I watched my wife's face as she absorbed this final betrayal, not just from her sister, but from the parents who were supposed to love her unconditionally. I watched her realize that nothing would ever make them see the truth because they had chosen their side long ago. Natalie took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. She said she understood now. She said they had made their choice and now she was making hers. She said not to contact us again. She took my hand and we walked out of that house. She did not look back. Neither did I. The first months after cutting off her family were brutal. Natalie grieved like someone had died because, in a way, someone had. The sister she thought she knew, the parents she had trusted, they were gone. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. She cried at unexpected moments, driving past a restaurant where her mother used to take her for birthday lunches, hearing a song that reminded her of childhood road trips, finding an old photo while cleaning out a drawer. I held her through all of it. I did not try to fix it or minimize it. I just stayed present, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. We started seeing a therapist together, someone who specialized in family estrangement. It helped to have a space where Natalie could process her emotions without judgment, where she could mourn the family she had lost while learning to accept the one she was choosing. The therapist helped her see patterns she had been blind to her whole life, how she had been trained to put everyone else first, how her parents had systematically taught her that her needs mattered less than Brooke's, how she had spent decades earning love that should have been given freely. 3 months after the confrontation, I got a job offer in Seattle. It was a senior position at a tech company, a significant step up in responsibility and salary. More importantly, it was a chance to start fresh, to build a life somewhere without the shadow of the past. Natalie said yes before I even finished explaining the opportunity. She was ready, we both were. We sold our house in Portland, packed our belongings, and drove north. When we crossed the state line into Washington, Natalie rolled down her window and let the wind blow through her hair. She was smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. We found an apartment overlooking Puget Sound, with windows that filled the living room with light. Natalie transferred to a school in the city, where she was welcomed by colleagues who knew nothing of her history, who saw only the dedicated teacher in front of them. The years that followed transformed us. I was promoted twice eventually, becoming the head of my engineering team. The work was challenging and fulfilling, the kind of career I had always hoped for. Natalie thrived in her new environment. She started a weekend tutoring program for immigrant children, helping them learn English and adjust to their new country. What began with 3 students grew to 30, then 50. She partnered with local businesses for funding and recruited volunteers from the community. We bought a house with 4 bedrooms and a big backyard. We planted a garden, learning through trial and error how to grow tomatoes and sunflowers. We got a golden retriever named Biscuit, who greeted us at the door every evening like we were the most important people in the world. And then Emma came. Our daughter was born on a spring morning, with the sun streaming through the hospital windows. When the nurse placed her in Natalie's arms, I saw a peace settle over my wife that I had never seen before. We were our own family now, complete and whole. Emma grew up surrounded by love. We made friends in our neighborhood, other young parents who became our support system. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners and summer barbecues, building traditions that were entirely our own. We traveled, something Natalie had always dreamed of. Paris for our 5th anniversary, Rome for our 7th. A month in Greece the summer Emma turned 5, watching her splash in the Mediterranean, while we sipped wine and marveled at how far we had come. Through a mutual acquaintance from Portland, we occasionally heard news about Natalie's biological family. Brooke never married. She moved between jobs and cities, never settling anywhere for long. The baby, a boy, was being raised primarily by Richard and Diane, who had aged rapidly under the strain. They had reached out once about a year after we moved. A letter from Diane filled with careful words about family and forgiveness and moving forward. Noticeably absent was any acknowledgement of what Brooke had done, any real apology. Natalie read it once, then put it in a drawer. She never responded. She told me it was not about anger or punishment. She had simply learned that some people were not capable of giving her what she needed, and she had stopped waiting for them to change. Looking back now, I understand something I could not have grasped in the middle of the storm. Betrayal does not just hurt, it clarifies. It shows you who people really are, stripped of pretense and performance. And sometimes that clarity is the greatest gift, even when it comes wrapped in pain. Natalie lost her family of origin. But in that loss, she found herself. She discovered that she was stronger than she had ever known, more resilient than anyone had given her credit for. She learned that love should not require you to sacrifice your dignity or ignore your pain. Family is not just blood. Family is the people who show up, who choose you, who love you without conditions. We built our family, Natalie and me and Emma and the friends who became like siblings. We built it deliberately, consciously, with all the intention that makes something precious. If you are watching this and going through something similar, I hope our story gives you courage. You deserve a life where you are loved properly, where your boundaries are respected, where your pain is acknowledged. And sometimes building that life means walking away from the people who should have loved you the most. It is not easy, it is not quick, but it is possible. And on the other side of that hard journey is a peace you cannot imagine until you find it. So here is my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because staying would have meant losing yourself? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories about resilience, growth, and finding your way to a better life. Thank you for watching, for listening, for being part of this community. Whatever you are facing right now, I hope you find your path to peace. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Until next time.